Herzlich willkommen zum Künstlergespräch, das wir in Englisch führen werden. Wenn Sie Übersetzungen bräuchten, melden Sie sich. Ich kann gerne auch übersetzen. Ist für alle Englisch okay? Gut, wenn Sie... Dann würde ich es übersetzen. Können Sie gerne testen. So, welcome for the artist talk. DD Dorvillier, performer and choreographer of Danza Permanente, and Zeena Parkins, composer, collaborator, sound operator, and musical director of the performance. Thanks a lot for this great night. For me, you really created an experience for me that offered me a different perspective on the relation between choreography and music, or like visual perception and sonoric perception. And so the base of your work is this Beethoven String Quartet, Opus 132, in A minor. When I met you, I guess 5 years ago, you presented in the theater where I worked at this time a performance in which you worked with movement in a quite absurd way, which were like amplified through no change, through a lot of different mics. So I had the feeling that the body and its presence, it's very autonomous and slips through all categories. So when I heard that you now approached a Beethoven string quartet, I was a bit surprised. So I would love to know first, how did you get the idea, or why did you started working on this, on a music score, first of all, but also on this very specific music score?
Okay. So I had heard the late string quartets of Beethoven. Already we had been working a lot with different relationships of structural relationships of using music and dance together. And I heard the string quartets, and I had often asked myself this question of when I make a movement, any movement, maybe you call it a gesture, a movement. When I make a movement, it sometimes a child might see it, and I could make a funny movement, and it would make somebody laugh. Not even because of my face, but something about movement produces an effect, produces an affect between the mover and the watcher, and I've been always fascinated by that you could make, contortions that they carry something, but at the same time don't. Then I heard the late Beethoven string quartets, and I was really shocked and moved by how much affect is happening when I listen to this music, how much thinking I'm feeling, and how much feeling I'm thinking about, and how many colors and textures, and it's so many different layers of experience through listening. And it's a musical construction, yes, but I'm fascinated by how that works, how the structure of, a theme and its variation, how that works, how high contrast between dynamics, piano, forte, how all that works. Why do I think? Why do I think I hear people talking between instruments? So I love that the structure of this music was doing something like this, and I wanted to know if I applied that structure to dance, what would happen. And this particular one, because it's so beautiful, and that adagio in the center is so blatantly religious, and I'm not, and yet I found the music incredibly moving and beautiful. And then I had heard a recording. Many reasons made me like this particular one, and I decided that we would try it.
And was it for both of you clear from the very beginning that you would eliminate the music, or is it something that came in the process? And how did you work precisely? How did you approach the work, Zeena?
So to be clear, I think almost without saying, knew that no part of the quartet itself would be audible by string players. Like it would be audible in different ways, but not by hearing a recording of it or having a live string quartet, as seductive as that would be to have a live string quartet playing the piece. So then, there you are. You're left with that empty page of what to do next. And really, we listened to the work a lot, and our favorite recording was this recording by Quartetto Italiano that's made in 67. So it's an old recording.
Not that old.
and very distinct choices about tempos that they took for the different movements, because there's quite amount of variety of tempos that various quartets choose to use, and so we were quite enamored and moved by this particular performance, and this became kind of the model performance that we used. And when we listened to the piece, we listened to many versions, but this is the version that we came back to and referred to many times when we were working on the piece. But then, where did we go from there? And after listening and getting the score and printing out the score in such a way that we could actually, it sort of became a workbook in a sense, the score. And we made it not so precious that you couldn't write on it or think with various, utensils like pencils and pens. And we ended up with a table with a little keyboard and a wonderful variety of colored pencils and 2 Xerox copies of the score. And from there emerged a way into the piece by identifying various themes that we ended up color-coding these themes, and color-coding these themes from beginning to the end in various ways, addressing these themes that we sort of unearthed in various ways. And as I said yesterday, I prefer to call them topics rather than themes. But and that was the doorway in to the piece for us.
Yeah. For each movement, there's 5 movements in the piece. For each movement, we had a different strategy of coloring. For instance, the first movement had all themes, and there was, something like, I can't remember how many colors, 18 colors, and whenever you see or hear the da da dee da da dee da, then that's the green theme, or da dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da da dee. I'm singing it very badly, and that's the blue. That's the aria. That's the blue theme, and then there's the motet. Bum, 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 bum. So those things, and they just kept repeating throughout the score in sort of complex ways, but sometimes very simplified ways. But we try to take into account every note, and for each of the instruments. Well, we're missing one of the violins, but where?
So also, just to clarify, taking into account every note, that the dancers did something that most musicians never do, which is actually they memorized every note of their part to the entire score. Just so you know that.
In 4 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy also to introduce to you 2 of the dancers. So Cecilia, Lisa, Eliceche, who just learned the part of the first violin, and Walter Dundervill, who is the violoncello. And Fabian Baba, the second violin, is I don't know if he will join or he has to leave very early. So he cannot join. But yeah, thanks a lot. We were just starting to talk about the process you went through. So Walter, you were part of the core quartet or the original quartet. How was it for you? Is like working in such a close relation with a music score normal part of your practice as a dancer, or was it something surprising? Because going through dance history, there was this, especially in the 20th century, there was this process of emancipation of dance and music from each other. So, how was it for you as a contemporary dancer and performer?
It was very different because I definitely come out of the school of dance liberated from music. And also there's often a way that dancers study music that isn't really correct in terms of musical notation. It's often felt or counted in our own way. So this was really an amazing process because it had both a sort of conceptual and pragmatic approach that DD and Zeena devised. So when we started the piece, we built the piece in a series of residencies that would last about 3 weeks at a time. And in the first series of residencies, we spent a lot of our day sitting down at a table with the colored pencils. So we were given blank scores. They didn't analyze the scores for us and just hand it to us and say, here, learn your part. They taught us what the themes were that they had identified so that we were given sort of the legend or the map, and we were assigned to go through our score, each of our own musical lines, and identify what we thought was the first theme or the second theme or the motets. And so it was just a conversation amongst all of us to determine, well, is this a motet or is this half note really a part of the first theme? And then we'd listen to the music and decide. And sometimes there would be a question between them even. And so we would all be putting in our 2 cents to determine what we thought our part was. So we would come to a consensus about it. So we were learning the whole process together as a group, which I think was also important to integrate us as a quartet and not just dancers in a piece. And it taught us how to read music, which was really good. Yeah.
Cecilia, you just stepped in. And what fascinates me if I see like music quartets playing is like at the same time you see the performance of each individual instrument and like you hear the line of them, but together they have a very big sense of, you can feel really the constant communication. So how was it you first started to learn your part alone or independently from the others, but how important or how is it then suddenly to perform it as a quartet? How important is the communication between each other? So do you adapt your movement also to the dynamics of your partners, or how does communication work?
No, I didn't learn it on my own because I got to know that Didi called me last Thursday. So I arrived here on Sunday and I started learning with Didi and Walter. I do my role, the violin, but it's always in reference to them, and because also dance is three-dimensional, and there's so much things to do with space that it had to be made according to the others. But it was crazy because I felt like Monday and Tuesday there was already some kind of rhythm established, and when Fabian came in, it's like that's when the thing started really happening. The quartet, Yeah, exactly. And but no, I mean, it was essential to the communication because the guys are incredible. They were giving me cues the whole time. I think there's more cues than usual in the piece because it's just so that I know where I am, or by looking, or yeah. If they wouldn't have be giving me cues, looking at me, giving instructions, I wouldn't have been able to learn it. Yeah, but
string quartets give them. In a string quartet, there's always this eye communication and body communication for giving cues. It's not that dissimilar.
But was the analyzation of these ways of communicating also something that, or did you study the performance of string quartets as well, or just the recording of this Quartetto Italiano?
We went to see a string quartet in New York play this piece, right? Wasn't your sister? No. We went to see a string quartet play the piece. Yeah, and yeah, we made choices. We thought about, well, when a string quartet enters the stage, there's that moment where they get settled in and they drink their water or they put down their cloth or something, and then between movements, sometimes somebody might have to shift or change something. So we thought about that kind of stuff. We didn't really look to imitate it, but it definitely gave us a reason to go backstage and drink some water and come back on. Like it was permitted.
Yeah, and also affected the choices I made in terms of sound, because normally when you go hear a string quartet, you hear the piece, and then in between the movements, it's a little bit, the protocol or the understanding is it's a little bit of a downtime. You don't clap between the movements, but it's, even though you might think it's one big arc of one piece, it's a little bit, a slight timeout between movements. And it really made no sense for me to have sound or music while the dancers were playing the piece, but the times in between the movements was an opportunity to have a different kind of sound world. So I used that those moments to insert a different quality of sound.
Yeah, I would like to take the opportunity also to open to the audience. So if you have any questions or remarks, just observations, join our dialogue. Are there any questions or remarks, as I said?
How long? Yeah, for me it seems it started long ago. It did. So we premiered the piece with Walter Fabian Nayara, who's being replaced by Cecilia, and Nuno, who I replaced. We started working in 2011. Is that right? 2011? Yeah, in the summer of 2011, and we premiered the following 2012 May. And then we did a few performances. We did New York. We performed a bit, but we haven't performed it a lot, and it's quite a difficult thing to get started again. When we go to perform it again, we have to kind of relearn it because it's like memorizing a text, basically. But yeah, we worked on it. We premiered it in 2012.
How many events did you have with this performance?
With the original cast, we performed twice at Stuk in Leuven in Belgium, and twice in Paris. Then again, New York was the next time, right? We had five performances in New York City. That was in 2012. And then where did we perform it again before Kai? Kai was the next one. Okay, Kai Theater in 14 this year, right? Yeah. And then here. So it's very special that you get to see it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Or are there questions? More questions?
I found it a very special event too. Fantastic. And I'd just like to know a little bit more about the sound that was introduced and the words. Did you change the language according to which country?
No.
It's always in German.
Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
So, yeah, Beethoven's German. And, yeah, I liked that the title is in Spanish because that's my sort of secret native tongue. And I feel like it is a kind of secret majority language in America, North and South America. And but then we chose these German words because Beethoven's German, and it's a nice sound. And I don't know how we get because we wanted to introduce these words.
Yeah, so maybe you should talk about the words.
Okay, so the words come from the motet, which is the red thing that you see.
The beginning.
There are 4 notes. They sort of represent not just the notes, but they represent the relationship of the notes. A low note, a high note, a high note, a low note. So it goes as kind of cycle, like over a hill. A cycle like spring, summer, fall, winter. But we didn't want to do that because there was already another one, Vivaldi, blah, blah, blah. But we came up with Heather, the first violinist, that was the first violinist who got pregnant. She came up with birth, school, work, death as a life cycle. And then we made these gestures very quickly. Well, what is birth? Etc. School, work, and tod. And it was never intended necessarily that you would know that it would produce some feeling, but for us it gave a quick reaction to the behaviors of notes that sound like a life cycle, and then we put something very superficial on it, but then it becomes, those are our 4 gestures that comprise all of the variations of this motet theme that repeats throughout the first movement. So voila, that's where the words come from. And I feel like they're also kind of deep in a shallow and beautiful way. I have to say that I think that sometimes that this piece can be kind of shallow and deep at the same time. The way it moves through topics, it forgets about what it just did. We have this incredible adagio that just, and then we go right into this little da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. So, surface, depth.
Have you ever danced to a performance with music, like just for practice, or
Do you want to answer that?
We would use the score in the beginning, especially, to come up with things that we would decide to use as movements. Because once the DD and Zeena had identified the themes and the way that they were going to analyze the score, then we also had to just come up with what are the movements going to be. And there were various strategies, and one of them was DD would just play the score and we would dance to it, and we would come up with, she never intended the score to be played during a performance, that we would have a relationship to the music in that way. But yeah, we listened to it a lot in the beginning to just get a feeling of what it is. Even now at this point, when I've performed it or worked on it so many times, I can get very into the head of counting it and sort of having a relation to it structurally and formally, and I'll forget what the actual music is, so I have to go back to remember sometimes what the actual music is.
I had a nice experience today where I really felt like I was hearing the music and I was trying to turn it off because there was so much to focus on. I felt like I was really hearing when I was dancing, when we were in the E minor section, I was like, oh God, I'm not going to remember what to do next because I was getting very involved. It was really lovely.
was ist jetzt gemein? Also, Didi hat gesagt, dass sie heute ein besonderes Erlebnis hatte, dass sie beim Tanzen plötzlich das Gefühl hatte, sie hört die Musik, die ist so präsent, und hatte sie immer das Gefühl, sie muss die ausschalten, damit sie nicht die anderen nicht verpasst, was sie eigentlich machen muss. Und Walter hat erzählt, dass sie am Anfang sehr, sehr oft die Musik gehört haben, dass Didi auch manchmal die Musik gespielt hat und sie einfach dazu getanzt haben, aber es war immer von Anfang an klar, dass das Stück dann ohne Musik gespielt wird, und Walter hat gesagt, dass er so stark sich das Stück überzählen merkt, dass er dann praktisch eine sehr sachliche oder sehr trockene Beziehung zu dem Stück hat und dass er dann ab und zu wieder in die Musik hineinhören muss, um wieder dieses Gefühl zurückzukriegen. Ich hoffe, wenn ich was vergessen habe, ergänzen Sie es bitte. I'm quite curious because like music expands in time and choreography expands in time and space. How, and that's what created such a exceptional experience for me also, because you don't dance on music, you dance the music, or you are the music, you're the instruments and you're the sound at the same time. That's so, and this meeting of like spatial expansion and expansion in time creates a very strange and confusing experience for me. So how did you transpose this music score in space? Did you have also quite vigorous rules for that, or how do you choreograph the movements?
I want to just say one thing about what you just said, because I think music also expands in space as well. So, and that's partially only because and that's actually something that's a little bit of a hallmark of our work together, is really being aware of the architecture of the space that we're working in terms of how we're going to use sound. So this idea of sound and space is really at the forefront of our concerns when we're working together. So in this particular case, we were using many speakers from all the way behind the curtains to all the way, extending all the way behind the audience. So you really get a sense of the kind of the borders of the space, and perhaps in a different way unless we just use them as a proscenium stage. So and that helps then give you a different relationship to where you are and what you're listening to and seeing.
So I want to answer that question, but I also want to say about sound and space that I think what music does and sound does as well in terms of space is it expands space inside. And it's interesting because we're kind of transposing an internal space of perception into an external kind of visual space of perception. And it's the movement between this inside and outside that is, to me, I think that's always been something that I'm fascinated with, working with, that I kind of live for, because it's this sort of permeability of self and other. So that, yeah, so that bringing of the music from that expands the space inside. And what if we take that same expanding inside space and put it before us? So but that's I like to think about it. I appreciate that part of the question. And then the other part of the question is how did we deal with how we dealt with space. So in the first movement is a good example. there's different keys. It switches sort of registers or keys as we go along. So it starts in A minor, which is the sort of dominant key of the whole quartet. And A minor, we decide, is facing front. And then we take C major, which is the relative major. We take C major and we're looking upstage. We have the E minor section, which is looking this way, and the G minor section, which is looking that way, or maybe it's E minor, it's G minor. So we for all of the parts that have the theme da da dee da da dee da, we change according to what key is a different facing. So you see the piece, the little fragments turning around in space. It's very, in a way, it's kind of basic or simplistic. And then for the aria, the that part is a kind of lake or a pool in the center of the space where we didn't give it the same kind of treatment. And that's just one way of dealing with space. The adagio has, the notes are hidden in different corners of the room, and that's why we're looking at different places, because those are the notes that we're hitting. Well, it's kind of letting the cat out of the bag.
More questions?
Hi, I would like to know, did you feel the necessity to take advantage of more artistic devices than only dancing? Because, in order to cope with Beethoven, because you were both dancing and, taking advantage of light, sound, voices, and so on. But you could also only have danced, but you didn't. So you could only have danced, but you didn't.
Yeah, there was something about, first of all, I wanted to work with Zeena, and I wanted to ask my close composer friend to see if she would work with me on a piece that we're supposed to dance in silence. So already that was difficult. So I wanted to work with Zeena on this piece in particular because I feel like it addresses a lot of our questions about music and dance. Even I wanted to take the risk that there might not be sound. But as we kept working, it was so exciting that we found solutions and desires to put sound in there. We were never sure if there was going to be any sound at all. And yes, I do have a question about things like lights, about when we wear shoes, when we're on a floor. Can we do it outside? Can we do it in the sunlight? Yeah, I'm wondering, But we had been commissioned to do it for a theater. So we wanted to work with lights in a way. And also Thomas Dunn, who designed the lights originally, is someone that we've worked as a trio before in other works. And it made sense to work with him on this as well. But yeah.
No questions anymore. I guess we should go down to the bar and have a beer or another drink. Herzlichen Dank, dass Sie noch zum Künstlerinnen- und Künstlergespräch gekommen sind. Thanks a lot for sharing with us all these insights. Und ich möchte Sie herzlich noch einladen zu den Tanzveranstaltungen oder den ganzen Performances, die ab Samstag bei uns starten. Stay Cool, Run Wild heißt das Programm, was jetzt die nächsten 2 Wochen bei uns hier im Mousonturm zu sehen sein wird. Wir präsentieren junge Choreografen und Theaterkünstler aus Finnland. Das sind sehr tolle, sehr skurrile, witzige Stücke, zu denen ich Sie herzlich einlade. Thanks a lot for the nice performance.